Hello, it's iBookBinding's podcast. Today, our guest is Kaija Rantakari, a bookbinder and book artist from Finland. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you too, and thanks so much for inviting me, Stepan and Pavel.
Yeah, it's great to see you here. My co-host is Pavel. I'm Stepan. Pavel is in Moscow. I'm in Leiden, at least for now. And let's just dive in. I understood, not really understood. I know that I saw your works quite a long time ago, and I saw your works over the years and sort of how they changed and the development of the process. And we wanted to invite you to discuss a topic that surfaces from time to time on our podcast. What is a book? What makes a book a book? What isn't a book? When a book isn't a book, and when an object isn't a book. So
easy.
And it's a topic. And I guess your works and some of your works represent this approach to this borderline states of being a book or not being a book. So what's your your approach to this issue?
Well, in book art, I think if the artist says this is an artist book, we owe it to the artist to at least entertain the idea that it's a book, even if it looks nothing like a book. It's like we can view any object from that angle. What if this is a book? What resembles a book in this piece? And I think it's a really interesting question. But I think, to me personally, an artist book is something that requires interaction. It's an object that's made to be handled instead of a sculpture that's usually meant to be just viewed, so that the book is an object that needs to be handled, to be fully revealed. And I think a book contains information. It doesn't need to be verbal or written information or even pictures. It can be I'm working on something which has sense in it, and it's like it can be many things, this information, but we get something from the piece. We maybe learn something from it, or I don't know. There are many ways to approach this information side of the idea, and I think almost any object can be viewed from that angle. That does this have page-like elements in it? Most things have.
You know, to me personally, many of the objects you make remind of late medieval handheld reliquaries. They were also tactile objects. They were also they often had two states: closed state and open state, and they contained an object within that, or an image that conveyed certain information, certain feelings, certain story. And I think in your case in particular, these objects are like reliquaries. They remind you of something that happened to you, and they convey certain feelings, certain emotion. Much of your work is about emotion, not just about the visual side of things. Would you say it has a psychoanalytic, psychological function?
I put a lot of myself into my work. I'm actually a full-time poet at the moment, and this bookbinding thing is just a side business. And in my poetry, I also always give something from myself to my readers, and the same goes to book objects as well. It's I have this ability to capture an emotion or some fragment of a certain moment in time and put it into this object to be preserved and experienced by others as well. It's not that this my own personal little thing is very important. It's just that it's human, and we all have those things that can be revisited through art created by others as well. So I think I'm reaching the human side of art and books and things like that in my work. We have shared things.
I think this last year in particular showed us all our common humanity, because wherever we lived through this calamity, we all felt very similar things. And I've seen a number of objects you made where you reflected on this pandemic and how you lived through it. Could you perhaps talk a bit about this series?
Where to begin? It's difficult. I think well, this past year has been a very lonely one. So it has given me lots of time to reflect on the things that matter and how important the shared time we have with others is, and how fragile we are as people. And I think I made this piece. This is called The Tender Vessel. It's nothing like a book. There are these tiny hexagonal beads with letters in it. And I created this like as a compass to navigate these strange times. There are some words hidden into these letters that somehow resonated with me during this time of COVID. And it's just like we turn to tactile things when there's no human contact. We can't touch each other, so we touch objects and are tender to those when we can't show that tenderness to our loved ones who are far away, or sometimes not so far away, but still unreachable. And it has been like a year when I have shared a lot about myself personally, even more than before, because I can't really like build on the context I have with other people. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to take some selfies and put them into books. And yeah, it's like you work with things you have at hand. I don't know. I don't know if this answers your question at all. I wandered far away.
Was this also a project for Are You Book Enough challenge? Could you tell our listeners and viewers about what that is?
The Are You Book Enough challenge is a book art challenge founded by Sarah Maker of Inton All, It's a monthly challenge on Instagram where you have a specific theme for each month. So the idea is that during that month, you create an artist book that relates to that theme as loosely or tightly as you want. And then you share maybe your process or just the finished book and tell something about it, and look at what others have made and discuss those, and like connect with makers and artists all around the world. I think it's been going on for, I don't know how many years, like 5 years maybe. No, it's happened for a long time. It's a really lovely challenge. I try to take part of this most months, but sometimes I just don't have the time for it. But now I'm like pretty committed to this month.
And I guess this challenge is a good opportunity as well to explore what is a book and what isn't a book, especially as it's focused on artist books and experiments with books as objects. And I in the beginning, I asked you to sort of dive into this topic, and you did it absolutely amazing and perfectly. And you sort of replied all of the questions that we prepared.
Sorry.
But I guess we'll return to at least some of them, and when you'll be showing us some of the objects you prepared, we'll also discuss these things once again. But one thing I wanted to reiterate is the textual aspects of books and books that may be considered as books, because this is something that we also discussed with some of our previous guests, whether you need to have a text in a book for it to be a book or not. And well, there are some bookbinders and book professionals who are quite strict about this, and but at the same moment there are others who are, I guess, share your approach. Maybe not as radical as you, but still. And for me, the most beautiful thing about this is the that this spectrum exists, and we can talk about it, and we all can share our our opinions and our love to books in all these different ways, and create these different objects that may or may not be considered books. So what are the other methods of transferring the information from you to the book's reader or user if it's not a textual book? What are the different media you use to transfer some information?
Well, illustrations and images, of course, and I think materials are just as important, even though you can't experience them in full through Instagram or photos. It's like I use a lot of unconventional materials in my artist books. It brings another layer to the story that I use, like vintage fabrics or found materials, just random junk. I put it together and it comes art, and it's a book. And it also matters that these materials have a history. They belong to someone and they have gone through life. I think life leaves a mark on these materials, and it's not irrelevant to the finished book object that it has materials that have been handled for decades, or I don't know. It's just important to me that it's not all about engineering materials together. It's bringing together layers on a spectrum of like time
And it definitely seems that at least some of your books are able to provide this information, to tell the story just by the process of unfolding them or opening them, or interacting with them in some other ways, because not all of your books, as far as I understand, can be opened in the classic bookish way. So that's sort of another layer that still makes this object a book, because it tells its story. I have this stray thought for quite a long time. I'm trying to, every time when I listen to an audiobook, I tell everybody that I read a book, and I feel this conflict with inside of me, because I'm not really reading it, but I'm listening.
I know.
To it. But then I'm sort of reading, and but then if you tell somebody that you are listening to a book, you need to do a whole long explainer about that. Yeah, that's an audio book, and I usually use audiobooks, not paper books or something like that. And and your books adds much more layers to this process, and I guess need much more explanation.
Yes, they are tactile in a way that cannot really be captured through photos fully. And I also, as a poet, a published author, I have ideas about audiobooks and whether or not they're great stuff or not. It's like they have their purpose, and I really love it, and I listen to books a lot. But books as objects are more than the words on their pages, and it's really difficult to pinpoint what it is that makes the book format as special as it is. And then when I make my books, these artist books, it's like, what am I doing here? How do I explain this? I know this is important, but I don't have the words to fully explain why it is important that you play along with me when I say this is a book.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I find it rather ironic that you, a poet of all people, don't put words in many of your books. I mean, it is a bit strange, you have to agree.
I think it has a lot to do with the language, because I write in Finnish, and I don't really make the artist books for the Finnish audience, because it's like this tiny, and all my bookbinder friends are from across the globe instead of Finland. So it's like I want to do work that is experienced by as many people as possible. So when I put words into my artist books, they tend to be in English. And well, sometimes I use bits of Finnish, but I think sometimes it's just the visual things that make the book, like you feel it in your heart instead of thinking it with your brain and trying to understand what the words are. And people are always struggling with poetry. They say, oh, I don't understand poetry, it's so difficult. What do you mean when you say this? And like, I'm saying what I'm saying, just take it as it comes to you. I'm not going to fine you if you don't understand it the way I wrote it.
But you do sometimes bind your own poetry, right?
Very, very rarely. But
how does that work? When you have a text that is so close, so important for you, how do you choose the design? I mean, those that I've seen on your blog tend to be very abstract.
I think, well, I've done this book. This is a poetry book published in 2018, written by me, and this is one of the few times I've actually found my own book, and this was also done as a part of the AreYouBookEnough challenge, just for the sake of it. The theme was sea, and this book is called Koko, meren, laajuus, which is like the whole of the sea, or something really translated. And I think when I'm dealing with my own poems or my own book, it was important to me that the design remains fairly minimal and abstract. I'm not trying to illustrate the poems, or it's like I wanted to give you a feel of what the poem is trying to give. It's calm, and it's powerful and soft and tender, and it splatters. This is like copper leaf on khadi cotton paper, a 2-mush binding, so it's soft covers with rough edges, and even the end papers are decorated with copper leaf. But it's much easier to create a design for a whole book of poetry. It's already been like put into a package. This is the book, and I know the feeling I put into those poems. But when I'm working on an artist book with text in it, it's like I hardly ever have the words in mind when I start designing the book. They go hand in hand. I only come up with the words as I go. It's like I go into a feeling and then just explore it and write down some emotions that come to mind. And it's like that's how I build my poetry books as well. But the process in those is hidden. It takes a few years, and then it comes from the printers, and ta-da, there's a new poetry book. But with these artist books, it's like I don't have those 2 years to think, what should I write in this piece? It's like, this piece clearly needs some words here. What should I put here? And how do I feel about this? And are these words relatable? Do they mean something to people other than myself? Is it worth sharing? Or is it worth sharing exactly because it's so personal to me? It doesn't really have to be relatable if it's important on a personal level. Those are always difficult choices, how to like prioritize personal and relatable. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is what you were expecting to hear.
Like with poetry, most of your answers give me the feel of what you mean. I mean, I like how you think about it.
I'm not a very like clear with my ideas. I'm just like going along with it and imagining things as they come. But still, as a bookbinder, I'm like super precise and all about the execution and perfect engineering when it comes to like those functional issues.
Perhaps a bit more concrete question.
Thank you.
I know you bind some journals that I assume you sell online, and but what happens to your artist books?
I hardly ever sell my one-off artist books. I don't know why. I could, but I'm like, people ask to buy them all the time, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. Not yet. Maybe well, of course, I'm also dreaming about an exhibition at some point soon-ish. So I don't want my books to travel to the ends of the world. And then I have to ask them to borrow it again or something. So I have done some editioned artist books, which I sell, but usually it's like, no, these are my treasures. These are like, I don't sell the originals. So you can experience them through photos, and at some point I probably will start selling them, but at the moment I'm holding on to my babies. I'm just emotionally attached.
It's very interesting to hear that, because with most of our earlier guests, I from time to time I ask them if it is hard for them to sell their books and their precious objects, and most of them are like, no, we get money, it's fun, it's great, we sort of put our soul into this subject, but now it's time to go for it and for us to focus on something new, so no, it's okay. And finally we have a guest who has a different opinion on this matter.
I think it's because I have no problem selling my journals. So it's like I have this part of my craft that I'm happy to part with. It's like, take them, give me money. And then these artist books are sort of like the hybrid child of my bookbinding work and my poet side of business. So it's like I get to sell my art in the form of poetry books, and these artist books, they get to stay with me if it feels like that.
Am I right that originally you started with more traditional bookbinding and only after some time switched to artist books, or was it a simultaneous process? How did it go?
I was trained as a traditional bookbinder. I graduated as master bookbinder in 2006, and my teachers weren't really that into art books. It was like
there is this divide between traditional bookbinding and artist books. We just had a talk with Lori Sauer, and we just published it. And there will be a second part to this talk where we discuss book structures, and she talks a lot about trying to make bridges between artists, between the communities of traditional bookbinders and artist bookmakers, and that's not an easy process. So
no, it really isn't. Because I personally, as bookbinder, I'm really strict about making the journals I sell as functional as possible, and they need to have structures that stand to be used like with passion. It's like you just toss your journal into your backpack and go, and we all know what happens to those books. So you can't just have just any structure or it will fall apart. I don't want my usable books to fall apart. They need to be the best books possible, but then the world of book arts, that's where you can explore different structures, and it's less relevant if they withstand rough use or not. I understand those traditional bookbinders who are really interested in making great books. And it's like, yeah, you can make books.
Mhm.
Those things are allowed, but just keep them kind of separate. Don't just like make books that can be handled the way they're meant to be in their own context. So artist books, they can be fragile. Journals, don't make them fragile.
It's interesting that you have these two heads and they're completely separate from
Yeah.
each other.
Do you know how people use your journals? Do they use them as diaries? Do they draw in them? Surely they send you some pictures.
Yeah, I guess pictures all the time, and I have lots of return customers who come back to me year after year, and mostly it's people just using them as journals, guest books for special events, sketchbooks. Some tiny books tend to go to like grandchildren, so like grandparents give those little books to their grandchildren and ask them to draw something in, and then you have a picture book by your precious grandchild and stuff like that. Just like pretty normal stuff. Yeah, I have customers who are artists and authors and just like normal people who appreciate their words and ideas and see no harm in writing in a pretty book. Some people are just like terrified. Oh, that book is so beautiful, I can't use it. My thoughts are so stupid, I would ruin the book. And I'm like, I don't see there any problem, and you don't have to have the perfect handwriting to write into a pretty book. You're allowed to have good things in your life.
Yeah, that's a good approach.
Is this your studio where you work?
Mm-hmm.
So is it a big operation, or is it like a one table?
It's tiny. I'm working in a writer's villa. This is a shared room with another poet. So I have one desk behind me and some drawers, and this one big desk in front of the window, and I have like minimal tools here. I have one backing press that can be used for other purposes as well, but I don't even have a board here or anything. I cut my board by hand. I know it's crazy, but I've done it for always. I haven't had a board here since school, so it's like, you make do.
Oh my God, I just Googled Writers Villa Helsinki, and I'm very impressed. Could you tell us a bit about it?
Well, this is a really beautiful wooden villa. It's 130 years old. This is by a sea bay in the city center, and I'm currently looking at some swans and hoping there will be no ice fishermen on the ice today. There were some yesterday, and it terrified me so much I had to leave the office because I was like, no way, I don't want to call emergency services because someone's fallen the ice. And yeah, but this is just a really, really lovely old building full of studios for writers. I think there are like 10 small or large studios here just for writers to work in. So I'm the only one who has a side business. And thankfully everyone's okay with it.
Are you renting it, or is it a residency program?
I'm renting this half of the room. I was here first as a resident in a residency program, but then I got to stay here with a friend. So yeah, this is where my latest book was written. It's coming out next week, I think.
Wow.
So it's really exciting time. It's my third one.
So it will probably coincide with the moment when this video will be published.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
My congratulations. What is your new book about?
It's love poems to portraits, like specific female portraits, paintings I've seen in galleries and museums. It's like moments I've fallen in love with some dead ladies and written poems about them. So it's like affectionate moments with imaginary people, I think.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. I have my long time lovers in museums all over Europe. So.
Yes, good. It's always good to have a few at hand.
If there will be a link to your book when it's published and available, if you send it to us, we will put it in the description below. So,
of course, it will be in Finnish, but maybe some Finn appreciates me.
Well, we definitely have Finnish members of our community, so hopefully at least some of them will be able to get access to this book.
I can also see a bookbinding project in here, an artist's book about portraits.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my lover secret. So, like, I can't share it with you, which women I've adored for years. Like, no. But maybe I'll bind it one day.
It sounds like choose your own woman and project my feelings onto her. And leave my women alone.
Yes. I think it's important in poetry to let readers have room for their imagination. Like, they don't need to know specifics of my experience to enjoy it.
I think this would be a great time to talk about another of your projects. The one you also made for the iBookEnough challenge, and it's also sort of a portrait, a self-portrait.
Untitled Stockings.
So what was the theme for that month?
The February theme was red, and my book is partly red, but it's this book called Untitled Stockings. There's a stocking in a case and a suspender, and I always think cases and containers are really important parts of artist books. So we have sun coming here. Yeah. So this is a concertina book, 3 parts. The top one has a mirror. Well, all 3 parts have mirrors, and there's lace. And then there's my legs and my hands. So that's a self-portrait I took one weekend. And then there's, again, a seam stocking over a mirror. And the other side has the same photo of my legs and hands. And this piece was actually created in a way that I had some extra rules to this challenge. I decided I want to take inspiration from 3 works of art and have very little of them remain in the finished piece. So I picked 3 works I love. A painting by Helen Scherfbeck, from which I picked some colors. And then there's this sculpture by Croatian or Yugoslavian artist Ivan Mestrovic. And that sculpture has really, it focuses on a woman's hands and her feet. And then there's a poem by Honor Moore called New Shoes, in which a woman wears sheer black socks and lace. So you can see all these elements in this book. So these are the backstories I hardly ever tell. And I like making things harder for myself.
Well, thank you for this backstory. That's an interesting insight in the creative process. And
how did these all ideas come together? Did you draw something? Did you write it down? Did you have it all in your mind before you started, or was it more of an improvisational thing?
I think it's a combination of both. I do scribble notes when I try to brainstorm what to actually do, and I usually go through some materials. Like, well, in this case, I chose the colors I wanted to work with first. I made some adjustments to those later on, but I looked for materials in those colors I saw in this one painting, and then decided that, well, these materials can be used in these kinds of ways. It's like the cotton khadi paper can be used to cover this slipcase, but it's not really great for like substantial pages. After picking the colors, I bring out all my like random materials, like the lace and the mirrors. They're from my father's stash. He knows the kind of presents I like. It's like, bring me your rusty bits and scratched mirrors, and I will turn them into something else. Yeah, I think it was finding those 3 mirrors that started to like lead the way with this structure. So I like the number 3. It's a good thing in an artist book to have 3 of anything. So I think the structure came from knowing that I would have to make a book that's substantial enough to carry those 3 fairly heavy mirrors. And I also wanted it to be book-like, so it can be opened and closed. And yeah, it's usually always a conversation between materials and my ideas. It's like they feed off each other, and I look for something special in my materials, and then I get a new idea, and explore if that could go into my book, and maybe it leads into an entirely new path, and then I start once again with something new. And it's always a process. I hardly ever have anything ready in my mind before I take out my materials.
I can imagine your granddaughters giggling when you show them this book in like 50 years, and asking, what are your stockings and where do you take that lace? I can't believe those are your legs.
Oh yeah. I'm happy with just me when I'm 80 looking at my legs. I'm like, cool. But yeah, actually this lace I've used here, it's from my great grandmother or great grand aunt. So I have all these like historical accumulations in my material stash.
How do you read this book? I mean, well, walk us through it. Where is the front? Where is the back? Does it have one? Does it have an order? How do you feel the structure?
Well, if you take it from the slipcase as I put it there, the lace comes first, and I think the structure of accordion book guides your way to how to use it as a book. And of course, these legs tell you the direction in which to hold the book. And I think this is the backside, because there's less visual elements on this one. But I don't know. I think this is just like a feel your way through it. Experience the things that come to your mind when you see these elements. It's like, of course, you have some memory of lace. It brings mind to some kind of memory. And the photo, it's my legs, but it could be someone else's too. Like you start imagining things when you're not given that much guidance into what this is about. It's there's no right way to read this, but it guides you through some order in which to view it. Because even in art, there are elements that pull your view first. It's like there's always a direction your gaze tends to go, and it's something the artist is aware of during the creation. You just take a focal point and work from there. But I don't know, is this somehow difficult to read?
It's not difficult, but there are many ways, which is why I asked you about yours.
And I don't think there's any wrong way to read this. It's like it's like a poem as an object. It's okay to feel the things you feel.
I also think it has a Dadaistic feel about it, because it says these are not legs. If you touch those stockings, you won't feel flesh. You'll feel glass. What could be more the opposite of flesh? It's brittle. It's hard, and yet there is something surreal about it.
I'm always blinding you with sunshine right now, and you can view your own reflection from all these. It's like you become a part of this piece when you look at it. And it's even weirder when I took photos of this and I'm reflected in the photos of this book as well. It's like I can't escape myself in this book, and neither can anyone else who touches this or uses in flesh, not in photos. So that's an element that can only be experienced live.
Sorry, I wanted to tune in even while we still have bells here. This also reminds me of all these memes about people who are trying to sell their mirrors and trying to not appear in the mirrors by putting a curtain on themselves and making a photo or something like that, making a photo from a corner.
But in a way. I've already entered this piece as an exhibitionist, kind of. So it's like there's no need to escape anymore. It's important that you can see me seeing myself, or I don't know how I should put it there. I want to be present as the creator of this piece in those photos of the finished work as well. It's just not that there's a weird selfie of my hands and legs in the piece. It's also that I'm in those photos of the finished work. I think it somehow actually completes the piece. I haven't really thought about this beforehand, but it feels relevant to be present in those photos as well. I'm drawn to this sort of like fragility that comes from revealing yourself as an artist, not like physically, but like emotionally. My work tends to be quite personal, even though it's not like detailed in words. But yeah, it's like I want to share something from my heart, and sometimes that includes sharing who I am as a person. It's like now I'm thinking of the memes where we're thankful of the comments of our flesh prison. Sometimes this flesh prison needs to be involved.
Stepan, do you have anything else to ask?
Well, as far as I understand, Kaija prepared some other books as well to show. So
yeah,
we've been talking for almost an hour now, and it's sort of our time is almost over, but because we will have another recording in an hour, and we still need to prepare for that. But if you can show some of these books you prepared for today, and we will just try to promptly go through them if that's possible. That would be just great.
I can share always not remembering with you. I think it's the most relevant to this, if it's a book or not a book. So this piece is from 2019 called.
Oh, it's shiny.
It's very shiny.
Because in the photos it's not so well, you can't really understand it.
Yeah, this book has these like mica scales on the front of the case. This is like a cylindrical case, and I try not to blind you any more than I happen to do. So the book is actually a cylinder, and also mica here, so very reflective. So there are layers of mica and silk chiffon and other translucent materials in here. So there are like layers sandwiched in the cylinder, and there's a text you probably can't read at all because of the reflections right now. But if you look through this piece, you can read the text, "I forget, I am forgetting you." And on the outside, there's also text, "Mere confusions of darkness." And this piece is obviously not shaped like a book, but these layers you can view by looking through this piece. I think they are the pages of this book. It's just that you don't have to like leaf through them. There are words on flat surfaces, one after another, but you just read them differently from a book with pages. And let's not forget, the codex is not the only book format in the world. So there are scrolls and things that are still considered books. And
not the only format, but definitely not the oldest format of a book.
Yes,
so. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's also the fact that you have to handle this book to read the text on the outside of the cylinder. So that's also an interaction required in reading this piece. So yeah, this is like this is a fairly poetic piece to me, about those moments when you forget you are forgetting someone. That's how forgetting happens. You don't realize it's happening, and it's taking place every moment in your life. And yeah, this is a very important book to me, and it's not like a book in its format. Do you have some questions about this piece?
Well, I guess that's a great illustration, because it definitely tells a story, and it definitely feels like a book in this way, and it's important for you in this form and in this shape and in this storytelling format, and I think that's a great thing that we had it for the last objects that you showed us, because I hope it will make people to think about what book formats are and what are books and what are books aren't. So thanks a lot for that. So we lost Pavel once again for some time. Pavel, did you have any more questions about this book?
A bit of a technical curiosity. How do you work? How do you work with mica?
You can cut it with a knife or scissors if it's thin enough layers, and it's this like natural mineral that is formed from like many layers of like really, really thin material. And
is it sold as a stone? I assume not. Already in layers, right?
It's in sheets, and you can further split them to be thinner and thinner sheets.
Just a week ago, I was at the Museum of Moscow History, and they have a great big window from the 17th century that is all not made of glass, but of layers and layers of mica. So for me, it also has this strange medieval feel too. You're looking through a window of time on the text.
Yes, that's really wonderful.
You mentioned earlier that boxes are quite important for your artist books, and that's also something we try to discuss with different bookbinders and bookmakers, because we can definitely see that for some of them books are a continuation of the book, and for other people, boxes are just functional objects that protect books and nothing more. Do you have this double head approach to boxes that are made for your artist books and for your traditional books, or it still remains the same for both worlds?
Well, I didn't really do boxes for my journals, but when I do boxes for fine bindings, then of course it's a continuation of the piece. Like no question, it needs to be of the same like soul as the book. It doesn't necessarily have to be of same materials, but somehow that the spirit of the book continues onto the box or case. And with artist books, it's obvious that they are a continuation of whatever's held inside the box. And sometimes it's like almost impossible to separate the two. So if these artist books were to be in an artist book collection, one would have to make another box to hold the box.
Most often for design bindings, even if the box is sort of in tune with the binding, it isn't a continuation of the story that is told by the design binding. Mm. Is it true for your design bindings as well, or you sort of take parts of this artist book approach and you try to continue the story that was told by the design binding in its box?
Maybe it's not as like a strong connection with designer bindings as it is with my artist books, but I do take elements from the design binding and incorporate them into the box. But it's not, they can be viewed separately. I'm not offended if you only display the design binding and don't bring out the case. But if you displayed my artist book without its case, I would be like, why did you forget the other half?
Because it feels that this is definitely a place where the worlds of traditional bookbinding and book arts can sort of interact and intersect with the approach to book boxes. Once again, not every bookbinder will agree with me, I guess, or will follow this approach, but at least there is a chance for a dialogue here.
Yeah, I often feel I'm at a very strange place in this like world of bookbinders, that I have this traditional training as a bookbinder, and I value those skills so much. But then I also want to have this area of play and art that is much more liberal than anything that could be done within the realms of traditional bookbinding. But yeah, I at some point I made the decision to create books that are meant to be used and not focused on design binding. It's something I do very rarely and just for fun. And then later on, I found this world of book arts that I knew was there, but I didn't really dedicate that much time on it. But now it's like, it's almost as important to me as this work where I bind journals for sale. This is like this is my mental health work. It's important to exercise my brain and come up with ways to build strange shapes and have them function as book objects and their cases and that is something that really benefited from my traditional training, because I know how to build cases and boxes, and I know if I add something to this side, I also need to add something to the other side, or it will go disastrously wrong. So it's important for me to have both these worlds.
But certainly your books are more experimental than your boxes, or were there any especially unusual ones?
Like boxes, or well, I have this one magic box that's also an artist book. So this doesn't have a separate box of itself. But, there's text you definitely can't read now, and then there's fingerprints on sheets of glass.
Yeah, I've seen this work online. This is this is really beautiful. It's a bit like a museum object.
Yeah.
And yet it's your own little museum case.
Yes. Yeah, and this is one of those that are like really personal ones. This is like my fingerprint and my partner's fingerprint. It was like staying with me, and like barely waking up, and I'm just like, can you borrow me your finger for a moment? I'm going to take your fingerprint, and you can go wash your hand later, but I'm just gonna do this now. It's like it's an artist book about fingerprints, but it's also an artist book about my fingerprints and his. Yeah, I think my artist book objects are definitely more experimental than their boxes, because it needs to be that the treat inside is more interesting than its wrapper. You want to be surprised by what you find and not disappointed after the amazing thing you just held in your hand. You need to like understand tension and drama.
I really hope that our talk will inspire some of the bookmakers, bookbinders, book artists to try something new, to get away from the traditional approach to bookbinding and to experiment with books as a format, because there is so much stuff there to explore and to try and to make new things. So thank you very much, Kaija, for this talk and for this demonstration, and it was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure talking with you too.
Hopefully we'll meet again and discuss your future projects, your future books, your future adventures. We'll all have adventures soon, I know.
Just a little while longer, and that it will be just fine.
yeah, just a bit. Okay. Also, thanks a lot to our community. I invite you to check our Patreon account and to join the crowd of our supporters on Patreon, because that's the money that comes from our Patreon supporters is what allows us to edit these videos for our podcasts and to move forward, because otherwise I just don't have enough time to do all this stuff, and we need to invite additional people for editing. Thanks a lot to our supporters, to our viewers. Like, subscribe, share, spread love, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.